The notification from my banking app made my heart stop. Warning: account balance below emergency threshold. I blinked hard, hoping I'd misread it. But the numbers didn't lie. My carefully maintained emergency fund of $42,000 had dwindled to just over $3,000. My name is Michelle, and until that moment, I thought I had my life perfectly organized. At 32, I'd spent years building that safety net, living frugally and saving every extra dollar I could. Now, staring at my phone screen in my apartment's kitchen, my hands started to shake. I immediately called the bank. "There must be some mistake," I said, pacing back and forth. "I haven't made any large withdrawals." The representative's voice was sympathetic, but firm. "I'm showing several transfers over the past 3 months, ma'am, all authorized using your credentials." "What? That's impossible." I grabbed my laptop and logged into my account. The transaction history showed multiple transfers to an account I didn't recognize. "Can you tell me who owns the receiving account?" "The account belongs to Elizabeth Diaz." My Aunt Elizabeth. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. "I never authorized these transfers. Never." I called my parents immediately, my voice shaking. "Mom, what's going on with my emergency fund? Why is Aunt Elizabeth receiving my money?" The long pause that followed told me everything. "Honey," my mother started, her voice small, "we needed to help Regina with her college tuition. She got into that prestigious program she wanted." "You what?" I practically screamed. "How did you even get access to my account? Remember when you were sick last year? You gave me your banking passwords to help manage your bills." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I'd been bedridden with pneumonia for weeks, and my mother had helped manage my finances temporarily. I'd trusted her completely. "That money was for emergencies," I said, my voice breaking. "My emergencies." "Family helps family, Michelle." My father's voice suddenly joined the call. "Regina needed the money more than you did. You're established. You have a good job." "Stop," I cut him off. "You had no right. This is theft." "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. "Regina's future is at stake. She's family." I ended the call and immediately dialed my best friend, Jade. She answered on the second ring. "They stole my emergency fund," I said, my voice hollow. "My own family stole over $38,000 from me to pay for Regina's college." "They did what?" Jade's outrage was exactly what I needed. "Michelle, that's not just morally wrong, it's illegal. You need to call a lawyer." "But they're family," I whispered, echoing my mother's words even as they made me sick. "Family doesn't steal from family," Jade said firmly. "Listen to me. If you don't take action now, they'll never respect your boundaries. They'll keep taking and taking." My phone buzzed with a text from Regina. "Please understand, cousin. This opportunity means everything to me. Mom and Aunt said you'd want to help." I threw my phone onto the couch. "They didn't even ask me, Jade. They just took it. Like I didn't matter. Like all my hard work meant nothing." "Then make them understand it matters," Jade said. "I have a number for a good family lawyer. His name is Nigel. Want me to set up a meeting?" I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built, the independence I'd fought for. The broken coffee mug on the floor seemed to mirror my shattered trust. "Yes," I said finally, my voice stronger. "Set it up. I'm done being the family ATM." Another text buzzed through, this time from my brother Kelvin. "Mom and Dad told me what happened. They're saying you're overreacting. What are you going to do?" I typed back, "What I have to do." Jade was still on the line. "I'll pick you up tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll go see Nigel together." After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the pieces of my broken mug and broken trust. My family had always preached about loyalty, about helping each other. But as I looked at my bank balance again, I realized their version of family loyalty was a one-way street. My phone kept buzzing with messages from various family members, all trying to justify the theft, all trying to make me feel guilty for being upset. I turned it off. Tomorrow, I would see a lawyer. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. But tonight, I allowed myself to cry for the family I thought I had, and for the harsh reality of who they really were. Jade's car pulled into the law office parking lot exactly at 8:55 a.m. I hadn't slept much, but the morning sunlight and 3 cups of coffee had given me enough energy to face what was coming. "You look like hell," Jade said, giving my hand a squeeze as we walked into the building. Thanks. That's exactly what every girl wants to hear before meeting her lawyer. The elevator ride to the 6th floor was silent. My phone had blown up overnight with messages from family members, each one more guilt-inducing than the last. I'd only responded to Kelvin, who seemed genuinely concerned rather than accusatory. Nigel's office was smaller than I expected, but warm and welcoming. The lawyer himself was an older man with kind eyes that hardened when I explained my situation. "Let me get this straight," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "Your mother used passwords you provided during an illness to transfer money from your personal emergency fund to your aunt's account without your knowledge or consent." "Yes," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have screenshots of all the transactions. They took $38,750 over 3 months. Jade, sitting beside me, spoke up. "And they're not even sorry. They're acting like Michelle's the bad guy for being upset about it." Nigel's expression darkened. "This is a clear case of financial fraud, regardless of family ties. However," he paused, looking at me carefully, "are you prepared for what pursuing legal action against your family might mean?" "What do you mean?" "Family court cases can get ugly, very ugly, especially when money's involved. Your relatives might say things, do things that can't be taken back. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my mother's dismissive tone, my father's assumption that my hard work meant less than Regina's dreams, and my aunt's entitled silence through it all. "They already crossed a line that can't be uncrossed," I said firmly. "I want my money back." Nigel nodded, pulling out some forms. "Then let's begin. We'll start with—" My phone buzzed. Regina's name flashed on the screen. "Take it," Nigel said. "It might be relevant." I answered, putting it on speaker. "Regina?" "Michelle, please," her voice cracked. "I heard you're meeting with a lawyer. You can't do this to me, to us. I'm about to start my 2nd semester, and if you make Mom return the money, I'll have to drop out." "That's not my problem, Regina. You should have thought about that before accepting stolen money." "I didn't know," she protested. "Mom and Aunt said you agreed to help. I only found out the truth yesterday when everything blew up." I looked at Nigel, who was taking notes. "Whether you knew or not doesn't change anything. That money was my safety net." "But I'm so close to my dreams." Regina's voice turned desperate. "Just give me a chance to finish this semester. I'll work part-time, take loans, anything. Please don't ruin this for me." Jade grabbed my hand as I closed my eyes. "Regina, I'm sorry, but I can't trust any promises right now. You need to talk to your mom about this." "Mom's crying. She says you're destroying the family over money. Is that what you want?" Nigel cleared his throat, signaling me to wrap it up. "What I want is my money back," I said firmly. "What happens after that is up to your mom. Goodbye, Regina." I hung up, my hands shaking. Jade immediately pulled me into a hug. "You did great," she whispered. Nigel finished his notes and looked up. "That call actually helps our case. Your cousin essentially admitted the money was taken without your knowledge. Now, let's discuss our strategy." For the next hour, we went through the legal process. Nigel explained how we'd first send a formal demand letter, giving them a chance to return the money before filing a civil suit. "What if they refuse?" I asked. "Then we go to court. With the evidence we have, the unauthorized transfers, their admissions, and your documented history of saving this money, we have a strong case." As we wrapped up the meeting, my phone buzzed again. A text from Kelvin. "Just talked to Regina. She's a mess. But I get why you're doing this. Can we meet? I think there's more to this story than anyone's telling." I showed the message to Nigel. "Meet him," he advised. "Information is power. Just don't make any promises or agreements without consulting me first." Outside the office, Jade hugged me again. "Want me to come with you to meet Kelvin?" I shook my head. "I need to do this part alone. But thank you for everything." "That's what best friends are for," she smiled. "Keep me posted." As I watched her drive away, I texted Kelvin back. "Coffee shop on 5th Street, 1 hour." The war for my emergency fund was officially beginning, and I needed all the allies I could get. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, but I spotted Kelvin immediately in our usual corner booth. He looked tired, his usually neat hair disheveled, and he was nervously shredding a paper napkin. You look about as good as I feel, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Yeah, well, it's been a rough couple of days. He pushed a coffee toward me. Already ordered your usual. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. So, what's this other story I need to hear? Kelvin glanced around before leaning forward. It's worse than you think, Michelle. Aunt Elizabeth isn't just using your money for Regina's tuition. She's been running a whole scheme. What do you mean? Remember how she always bragged about Regina getting that full scholarship? There was no scholarship. She's been taking money from different family members, playing them against each other, making up stories about emergency needs. My stomach dropped. How do you know this? Because she tried it with me first, he admitted, looking ashamed. 3 months ago, she came to me asking for money for Regina's special program fees. When I said I couldn't afford it, she started guilt-tripping me about family loyalty. That's when I started digging. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed, and we both jumped. It was just another customer, but Kelvin's paranoia was starting to make sense. How many others? I asked. At least 3 cousins and Uncle Rob. Each thinks they're the only one helping. Each got a different story. He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of messages. Look at these texts from Aunt Elizabeth to our cousin Sarah. She told her Regina needed money for medical bills. I scrolled through the messages, my anger building. Does Regina know about all this? I don't think so, not everything, but... He hesitated. But what? She's not as innocent as she pretends. I overheard her and Aunt Elizabeth arguing last week. Regina was demanding more money for some spring break trip, saying she deserved it after playing her part so well. The coffee in my stomach turned sour. Playing her part? Those tears on the phone earlier? The desperate college student act? She's been doing that with everyone Aunt Elizabeth scams. I pushed my coffee away, feeling sick. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was gathering evidence, he said, pulling out a USB drive. Bank statements, text messages, recordings of conversations. I was planning to confront Aunt Elizabeth myself, but then this happened with your money, and... He slid the drive across the table. I think your lawyer could use this. The bell chimed again. This time, Regina walked in. She froze when she saw us, then straightened her shoulders and marched over. Having a nice family meeting without me? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Sit down, Regina, I said coldly. We need to talk about your acting career. Her face paled slightly, but she sat. I don't know what you mean. Cut the act, Kelvin snapped. We know about the fake scholarship, the multiple stories, the spring break demands, all of it. Regina's facade cracked. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Mom's been planning my whole life since I was born. The right school, the right program, the right connections. Do you know what it's like to have your entire future mapped out by someone else? So you decided to help her steal from your family? I asked. I didn't steal anything. I just played along, made things easier. Mom said everyone was happy to help, that it was all arranged. Happy to help? I pulled up my bank statement. Does this look arranged to you? They drained my emergency fund without even asking. Regina's eyes widened at the numbers. I didn't know it was that much. Mom said it was just a few thousand from each person. Well, she lied, Kelvin said, just like she lied about everything else. Regina's lower lip trembled, but this time I could see the calculation behind it. What are you going to do? I'm going to get my money back, I said firmly. And now, thanks to Kelvin, I can help everyone else get their money back too. You'll destroy Mom, Regina whispered. No, Regina. Your mom destroyed herself when she decided to steal from her family. Regina stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I won't help you hurt her. I can't. As she stormed out, Kelvin turned to me. What now? I picked up the USB drive. Now we take this to Nigel, and then we call a family meeting. All the cousins, Uncle Rob, everyone. It's time they knew the truth. It's going to get ugly, he warned. It already is ugly, I said, standing up. But at least now we can fight back with the truth. Nigel's office was crowded with family members 2 days later. Uncle Rob paced by the window, while our cousins Sarah and Marcus sat rigidly on the small couch. Kelvin stood beside me, his presence reassuring as we waited for Nigel to finish reviewing the evidence. "This is extensive," Nigel said, looking up from his computer. "The systematic nature of these deceptions changes everything." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "It means this isn't just about Michelle's emergency fund anymore," Nigel explained. "We're looking at a pattern of deliberate financial fraud targeting multiple family members." Uncle Rob stopped pacing. "I gave her $12,000. She said Regina needed emergency dental surgery. She told me it was for special academic counseling," Marcus added. "Another $8,000. "And I gave her $15,000 for supposed medical bills," Sarah whispered. "I took out a personal loan for that." Nigel typed rapidly on his keyboard. "That brings the total to over $73,000, not including Michelle's $38,000. The room fell silent as the number sank in. Over $100,000, stolen from family through elaborate lies. "I can't believe Regina was part of this," Sarah said, shaking her head. "She seemed so genuine when she called to thank me." "She's a better actress than we thought," Kelvin replied bitterly. "The crying, the gratitude, the promises to pay it back, all rehearsed." My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Why are you doing this to your aunt? To Regina? We raised you better than this." I showed the message to Kelvin, who snorted. "Yeah, they raised us to be honest, except when they're the ones lying." Nigel cleared his throat. "I've prepared individual civil suits for each of you, but I recommend we present them as a united case. It strengthens our position." "What about criminal charges?" Uncle Rob asked. "That's an option, but it would mean involving the police. Are you all prepared for that possibility?" Before anyone could answer, the office door burst open. Aunt Elizabeth stood there, Regina hovering behind her. "So this is your little conspiracy meeting?" Aunt Elizabeth's voice was sharp. "Turning my own family against me? You did that yourself." I stood up, facing her. "When you decided to steal from all of us." "Steal? I borrowed money for my daughter's future, for your cousin's education." "Then why lie?" Sarah demanded, finding her voice. "Why make up different stories for each of us?" Regina stepped forward. "Mom, what is she talking about?" "Don't act innocent now," Kelvin snapped. "We have proof you were in on it." "Regina," Nigel intervened calmly, "would you like to see the evidence? The multiple stories, the different amounts, your recorded conversations about playing your part?" Regina's face crumpled. "Mom, you said everyone knew. You said they all agreed." "Of course they agreed," Aunt Elizabeth shouted. "They just didn't know they were agreeing. But it was for you, baby. Everything was for you." "I never wanted this," Regina whispered. "Not like this." Nigel stood up. "Mrs. Diaz, I suggest you leave now and contact your own lawyer. We'll be filing our suits this afternoon." "You wouldn't dare," Aunt Elizabeth hissed. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal from family," I quoted my mother's words back at her. "Isn't that what you always taught us?" Regina suddenly turned to her mother. "How much? How much did you take from everyone?" "It doesn't matter." "Over $100,000, Marcus cut in. "That's how much your mother stole from us." Regina staggered back like she'd been slapped. 100,000. "Mom, what have you done?" "What I had to do." Aunt Elizabeth grabbed Regina's arm. "Come on, we're leaving. These people clearly don't understand family loyalty." But Regina pulled away. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you." She turned to Nigel. "I want to make a statement about everything I know." "Regina," Aunt Elizabeth's voice cracked. "You can't." "I can, and I will." Regina's voice was steady for the first time. "I'm tired of the lies, Mom. Tired of being your excuse." As Aunt Elizabeth fled the office, Regina sat down heavily in an empty chair. "I'll tell you everything. How she planned it, who else she targeted, all of it." Nigel pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Start from the beginning." I looked around the room, at Sarah wiping away tears, at Marcus staring at his hands, at Uncle Rob finally sitting down, exhausted, at Kelvin standing strong beside me, at Regina preparing to confess everything. This wasn't how family was supposed to be. But maybe, through all this pain and betrayal, we could build something stronger, something honest. Okay. Regina took a deep breath. It started 2 years ago, when Mom first found out about the college program. The courthouse mediation room felt too small for the tension it contained. I sat between Kelvin and Jade, facing Aunt Elizabeth and her lawyer across the table. Regina had chosen to sit at the end, belonging to neither side anymore. Before we begin, the mediator said, I want to remind everyone that this is an attempt to resolve this matter without going to trial. Mrs. Diaz has requested this meeting to propose a settlement. Aunt Elizabeth's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Peters, cleared her throat. My client is prepared to offer a payment plan to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Jade muttered under her breath. I squeezed her hand to keep her quiet. We propose monthly payments of $500 to each affected party, Ms. Peters continued, until the full amount is repaid. Nigel leaned forward. At that rate, it would take over 16 years to repay the full amount. That's not acceptable. It's what I can afford. Aunt Elizabeth spoke for the first time, her voice trembling. I've already taken out a second mortgage on my house. What about the money you took? I asked. Where did it all go? Regina shifted uncomfortably. The college program only cost about $40,000. The rest went to maintaining appearances. Aunt Elizabeth cut in. Regina needed to look the part, to fit in with her wealthy classmates. The right clothes, the right car, the right apartment. So you stole from your family to keep up with the Joneses? Kelvin's voice was ice cold. That's your excuse? You don't understand the pressure? No, you don't understand. I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. That money wasn't yours to take. My emergency fund was for actual emergencies. Sarah took out a personal loan to help you. Uncle Rob delayed his retirement. Also, Regina could have designer clothes? Regina started crying. I never knew. Mom kept saying everything was handled, that everyone was happy to help. I should have asked more questions. Yes, you should have, Jade said quietly. But you didn't want to know the truth, did you? The mediator raised her hand. Let's focus on the settlement proposal. Mrs. Diaz, do you have any other assets that could be liquidated to increase the monthly payments? Aunt Elizabeth looked at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. I have some jewelry and investments. The jewelry and investments combined are worth approximately $60,000, Ms. Peters added. Nigel consulted his notes. That would still leave over $40,000 to be repaid. I'll get a job, Regina suddenly said. A real one, not the part-time thing Mom wanted me to do for appearances. I can contribute to the payments. You don't have to, Aunt Elizabeth started. Yes, I do. Regina stood up. I benefited from this money, even if I didn't know it was stolen. I need to help make it right. The mediator nodded approvingly. That could work. If Mrs. Diaz liquidates her assets immediately and combines that with higher monthly payments from both herself and Regina, we could be repaid within 3 years, Nigel calculated, with appropriate interest. And legal fees, I added firmly. Ms. Peters whispered something to Aunt Elizabeth, who nodded tearfully. We accept these terms. I'll start liquidating everything tomorrow. There's one more condition, I said, looking directly at my aunt. You need to tell everyone the truth, not just those of us in this room, but the entire family. No more lies, no more manipulation. Michelle. No, I cut her off. That's non-negotiable. Either you come clean to everyone or we go to trial. Your choice. The room fell silent. Regina reached over and touched her mother's hand. Mom, please. We need to stop living this lie. Aunt Elizabeth seemed to deflate. Fine. I'll tell everyone everything. The next hour was spent drafting the formal agreement. As we prepared to leave, Regina caught my arm. I know it doesn't mean much now, she said, but I'm sorry. For everything. For not asking questions. For playing along. For letting this happen. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The designer clothes suddenly seemed like a costume. The expensive jewelry like chains. What will you do now? I asked. Transfer to a state school. Get a real job. Start living in the real world instead of Mom's fantasy. She managed a weak smile. Maybe become the person I want to be instead of the person she wanted me to be. As we left the courthouse, Jade linked her arm through mine. You okay? I watched Aunt Elizabeth and Regina walking to their car, no longer the proud, polished pair they'd once been. I think I will be. At least now everyone knows the truth. Truth has a way of setting things right, Kelvin said, joining us. Even if it hurts like hell getting there. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. I heard what happened at mediation. Can we talk? I showed the message to Kelvin and Jade. One battle at a time, Jade advised. I nodded, putting my phone away. The war wasn't over, but at least now we were fighting with the truth on our side. The family gathering at Uncle Rob's house felt more like a trial than a confession. Everyone was there, cousins, aunts, uncles, even distant relatives who'd heard whispers of the scandal. Aunt Elizabeth stood in the center of the living room, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I've asked you all here because I need to tell you something, she began, her voice shaking. I've done something terrible. As she spoke, laying out her web of lies and manipulation, the reactions around the room shifted from confusion to shock to anger. My mother sat rigid beside my father, her face growing paler with each revelation. You told me Regina needed money for medical treatments, Uncle Rob's wife said, standing up. We emptied our vacation fund for that. And you told us it was for special academic programs, another cousin chimed in. We trusted you. Regina, sitting in the corner, kept her head down as the accusations flew. She'd changed in the week since the mediation. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She looked more real somehow, in her simple jeans and t-shirt. There's more, I said, stepping forward. Mom, Dad, you need to explain your part in this. My mother's head snapped up. Michelle, please. No, my father interrupted, surprising everyone. She's right. We need to come clean too. He stood up, addressing the room. We helped Elizabeth access Michelle's emergency fund. We gave her the passwords, helped her hide the transfers. The room erupted again. Kelvin moved to stand beside me as our parents faced the family's judgment. How could you do that to your own daughter? Aunt Patricia demanded. We thought we were helping family, my mother said weakly. Elizabeth said Michelle had agreed. But you never asked me, I cut in. You never even mentioned it to me. Because we knew you'd say no, my mother burst out. You've always been so rigid about money, so unwilling to help family in need. Regina suddenly stood up. That's not true. Michelle helped me with my college applications. She spent hours tutoring me for my SATs. She helped because I asked her directly, honestly. Regina, Aunt Elizabeth warned. No, Mom, I'm done hiding. Regina moved to the center of the room. I need to confess, too. I knew some of what was happening. I played along, pretended to be desperate when Mom needed to convince people to give money. I'm not proud of it, but I did it. The silence that followed was deafening. So, what happens now? Someone asked. Nigel, who'd been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward. Mrs. Diaz has agreed to repay everyone through asset liquidation and a payment plan. Regina will also contribute to the repayment. And the legal charges? Uncle Rob asked. We've agreed to handle this civilly, provided all terms are met, I explained, including full transparency about everything that happened. My mother stood up suddenly. I need to say something too. She turned to face me, tears in her eyes. Michelle, I betrayed your trust. I convinced myself it was okay because you're my daughter, because family helps family. But what we did, it was wrong. I'm so sorry. I wanted to stay angry, to hold on to my hurt, but seeing her there, finally acknowledging her mistake, cracked something in my chest. I trusted you, I said quietly. Both of you. That's what hurts the most. We know, my father said, moving to stand beside my mother. We'd like to make it right. We've decided to sell our vacation property to help repay your emergency fund. Aunt Elizabeth's head snapped up. The lake house? But that's been in the family for generations. And family helps family, my father said firmly, using her own words against her. The right way this time. Regina walked over to me. I start my new job tomorrow. It's just waiting tables, but it's honest work, and I've enrolled in community college for next semester. Good for you, I said, meaning it. The rest of the evening was a blur of tears, accusations, and eventually, tentative steps toward reconciliation. As family members began to leave, each stopping to hug me or whisper apologies, Kelvin nudged my shoulder. "Look," he said, pointing to where Regina and my mother were talking quietly in the corner. "Think they'll be okay?" "Eventually," I said, "once they learn to live in reality instead of fantasy." Jade, who'd been my silent support throughout the evening, squeezed my hand. "You did it. You stood up for yourself and made them face the truth." "We did it," I corrected her, including Kelvin in my glance. I couldn't have done this alone. As we left Uncle Rob's house, I felt lighter somehow. The money wasn't all back yet, the trust wasn't fully rebuilt, but at least now everything was in the open. Sometimes I realized that's where healing has to start. 3 months after the family confession, I sat in Nigel's office reviewing the repayment progress. The first wave of restitution had come through. Proceeds from Aunt Elizabeth's jewelry sales and my parents' lake house. "The numbers are looking good," Nigel said, sliding a document across his desk. "Your emergency fund is almost halfway restored." I scanned the figures, noting the regular deposits from both Regina and Aunt Elizabeth's wages. True to her word, Regina had taken a job waiting tables and was working double shifts to contribute more. "Have you heard from your parents lately?" Nigel asked, closing his laptop. "They come over for dinner once a week now. It's different. Better in some ways, harder in others." I traced the edge of the paper. "At least they're trying." A knock at the door interrupted us. Jade poked her head in. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful." "Perfect timing," Nigel said. "We were just discussing the latest developments, including this." He pulled out another document. "Aunt Elizabeth is requesting a meeting." My stomach tightened. "Why?" "She says she has something important to tell everyone. She wants all affected family members present." "The last family meeting went so well," I muttered, but nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. I've already contacted everyone else." The next day, I arrived at Nigel's office to find it even more crowded than before. Uncle Rob and his wife sat near the window, while Sarah and Marcus took their usual spots on the couch. My parents stood awkwardly near the door, and Regina sat alone in a corner, wearing her waitress uniform. She'd come straight from her shift. Aunt Elizabeth entered last, looking years older than she had just months ago. She carried a large envelope. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice rough. "I've sold my house." The room went silent. "What?" Regina stood up. "Mom, where will you live?" "I'm moving into a small apartment. The house sale will cover most of the remaining restitution." She opened the envelope and handed papers to Nigel. "The closing is next week." My mother stepped forward. "Elizabeth, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," Aunt Elizabeth cut her off. "I've spent my whole life pretending to be something I'm not, pushing Regina to live up to impossible standards and hurting the people who truly cared about me. It's time to face reality." Regina moved to her mother's side. "I'll help with the apartment rent. Between my waitressing jobs and the barista position I just got, we can make it work." "You should focus on your studies," Aunt Elizabeth protested. "I am. Community college is affordable, and I'm learning more there than I ever did trying to keep up appearances at that expensive university." Nigel reviewed the house sale documents. With this, everyone could be repaid within the month, rather than over 3 years. "That's what I want," Aunt Elizabeth said firmly. "A clean slate. No more debts, no more lies." Uncle Rob cleared his throat. "What about your retirement?" "I'll keep working. Maybe it's time I learned the value of honest work, like my daughter has." I watched Regina squeeze her mother's hand, saw the genuine pride in Aunt Elizabeth's eyes as she looked at her daughter in her simple work uniform. Something had shifted between them. Something real had replaced the shallow perfection they'd once pursued. "There's one more thing." Aunt Elizabeth turned to me. "Michelle, I owe you the biggest apology. I took advantage of your parents' trust in me, manipulated them into betraying you. I was so focused on maintaining appearances that I destroyed the real relationships in my life." "We all owed Michelle an apology," my father added. "And a debt that goes beyond money." I felt Jade's hand on my shoulder, steadying me as always. "The money was important," I said carefully, "but the trust was worth more. That's what really needed to be repaid." "And has it?" Aunt Elizabeth asked softly. Even a little? I looked around the room, at Regina working honest jobs to make amends, at my parents trying to rebuild our relationship one dinner at a time, at Aunt Elizabeth selling her precious house to make things right. It's getting there, I said, day by day. Nigel spent the next hour processing the house sale paperwork. As everyone prepared to leave, Regina caught up with me. I'm serving at the diner on 5th Street now, she said. If you ever want coffee, real coffee, not the overpriced stuff I used to insist on. Stop by? I smiled. I might do that. Outside, Jade linked arms with me. You okay? Yeah, I said, watching my family members disperse. All of them changed, all of them a little more real than they'd been 3 months ago. I think we all are. Sometimes I realized it takes losing everything to find out what really matters. And sometimes what you rebuild is stronger than what you lost. The last check from the house sale cleared on a sunny Tuesday morning. I stared at my restored emergency fund balance, feeling a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Want company for your coffee run? Jade asked from my apartment doorway. She knew exactly where I was heading. Regina's diner had become a regular stop in my routine, though I hadn't planned it that way. The bell chimed as we entered, and Regina looked up from wiping down a table. The usual? She called out, already reaching for coffee cups. Actually, I said, can we talk for a minute? She nodded, gesturing to an empty booth. My break's in 5 minutes. While we waited, Jade squeezed my hand. You sure about this? It feels right, I said, pulling an envelope from my purse. Regina joined us, sliding into the booth and untying her apron. Everything okay? Mom made her final payment yesterday, right? She did. I pushed the envelope across the table. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Regina opened it carefully, her eyes widening as she read the contents. This is a check for $15,000. I don't understand. It's for your education, I said. A proper loan this time, with terms and conditions all spelled out. Jade helped me draw up the paperwork. But why? Regina's voice cracked. After everything? Because you proved something to me these past few months. Working double shifts, living honestly, owning up to your mistakes. You've changed. We all have, she whispered, touching the check gently. The loan has real terms, Jade added, pulling out a document. Regular payments, reasonable interest, everything in writing. No shortcuts, no manipulation. Regina straightened her shoulders. I'll pay back every penny, the right way this time. I know you will, I said. That's why I'm offering it. The diner's door chimed again. Aunt Elizabeth walked in, looking different in her new waitress uniform from the budget restaurant where she'd found work. Mom, Regina called out, look what Michelle's offering. Aunt Elizabeth approached our booth cautiously. When Regina showed her the check and paperwork, she started to cry. After everything we did, she began. That's exactly why, I cut in. Because you both showed me that people can change. Real change, not just promises. We have family dinner at my new apartment this Sunday, Aunt Elizabeth said hesitantly. Would you come? Both of you? She added, including Jade. I glanced at Jade, who nodded slightly. We'll be there. It's not fancy, Regina added quickly. Just home-cooked food and honest conversation. Mom's learning to make lasagna. Learning is a generous word, Aunt Elizabeth laughed, wiping her eyes. But I'm trying. That's all any of us can do, I said, standing up. Try to be better than we were yesterday. As we prepared to leave, Regina hugged me tightly. Thank you. Not just for the loan, but for showing me what real strength looks like. Outside, Jade looped her arm through mine. You know what the best revenge is? Living well? No, she grinned. Watching the people who hurt you become better people because of the boundaries you set. My phone buzzed. A message from Kelvin. Mom's asking if you're still coming to dinner tonight. She's finally going to teach us her secret recipe. I smiled, showing Jade the message. My relationship with my parents was still healing, but like Regina's lasagna, we were learning, one honest conversation at a time. You know, I said, when I first discovered the theft, I thought my family was destroyed forever. I never imagined we'd end up here. Here being in a better place than where we started, more honest, more real. We reached my car, but I paused before getting in. Through the diner window, I could see Regina showing Aunt Elizabeth the loan paperwork, both of them smiling through tears. In a few hours, I'd be in my parents' kitchen, learning family recipes and building new trust. On Sunday, we'd crowd into Aunt Elizabeth's small apartment, eating imperfect lasagna and sharing honest conversations. My emergency fund was finally restored, but I'd gained something worth far more, a family that had learned the hard way that love without honesty isn't really love at all. "Ready to go?" Jade asked. "Yeah," I said, starting the car. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Because that's the thing about family. Sometimes it has to break completely before it can be rebuilt into something stronger, something true. And sometimes the deepest wounds, when healed properly, leave us with the greatest strength. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the diner behind, but carrying its lessons forward. The future wasn't certain, but at least now it was real. And that made all the difference.
At the age of 12, my life took a dramatic turn when my family relocated from Kenya to Canada. This transition introduced me to a vibrant new world filled with exciting opportunities, diverse cultures, and welcoming people. My father's success as a businessman ensured we had a comfortable lifestyle, which made settling into this new environment smoother. During high school, I met Russell, the person who would later become my husband. Our relationship had its ups and downs over the years, but by the time I was 22, we decided to fully commit and get married. I was ecstatic, envisioning a future brimming with love and joy. However, one significant obstacle stood in our way. Russell's mother, Doris. She was openly against our marriage plans. I couldn't shake off the feeling that her objections were rooted, at least partially, in my Kenyan heritage. Doris often made subtle, unsettling remarks that made me feel unwelcome. Unlike his mother, Russell was unfazed by these tensions. He cherished our relationship, valuing me for who I was rather than my background. Despite his mother's disapproval, he remained supportive, affirming his commitment to our union. Our wedding day was emotionally complex. While I was thrilled to be marrying Russell, the shadow of Doris's disapproval loomed in the background. Determined, I focused on the love Russell and I shared, trying to ignore any negativity. In the days that followed, Doris's disdain became more pronounced. She often made disparaging comments about my culture and heritage, which was painful. Although I wished for a harmonious relationship with my mother-in-law, it seemed increasingly unlikely. Russell tried to bridge the gap between us, torn between his love for both his mother and me. He promised to address the issues with Doris, but the atmosphere remained strained. Her continual subtle jabs and intrusive questions about my background were disheartening and began to affect my mental and emotional health. Despite these difficulties, Russell and I were committed to building our life together. We moved into our place and focused on our careers and plans. However, Doris's persistent disapproval and subtle hostility continued to cast a shadow over our happiness, leading to a point where her remarks became unbearable. I reached a breaking point. I had always striven to remain calm and composed, treating everyone with kindness, but Doris's continuous hurtful remarks finally pushed me too far. In a moment of frustration, I did something I had never done before. I raised my voice at her. I needed to make it clear that I was exhausted from her constant subtle digs and the unwelcoming way she treated me. "Doris, I've truly had enough of your incessant comments. They're growing tiresome." "Oh, I'm merely expressing my opinions. There's no need for you to be so defensive." "Expressing opinions? It feels like you're relentlessly targeting me because of my background. I deserve as much respect as anyone else." "I don't intend to offend, but you seem overly sensitive about everything." "This isn't about sensitivity, it's about respect." I am your daughter-in-law, and I should be treated with kindness and understanding. Perhaps if you tried to fit in a bit more, I wouldn't need to make these remarks. Fit in? I've been part of this community for years. This is also my home, and I shouldn't have to alter who I am just to appease you. And just so you know, I never sought your permission to marry your son, nor did I wish for it. I know you had different plans for him. That's unfair. We love each other, and that's what should matter to you. If only you were from a more traditional background, perhaps I'd be more accepting. I don't need your acceptance. I'm proud of my heritage, and I refuse to let you belittle me for it. Your prejudice is your issue to deal with. Well, maybe things would be simpler if you had married someone from your own culture. That's not the point. We are married, and you need to come to terms with that. Your ongoing disapproval is causing us pain, and I won't allow you to dampen our happiness. I never expected you to speak to me like this. Why are you being so aggressive? Perhaps you never anticipated that I would stand up for myself. I'm finished trying to please you. If that's how you feel, perhaps it's best if we keep our distance. That suits me fine. I deserve to be surrounded by people who respect and appreciate me for who I am. You're being unreasonable. No, I'm simply tired of being mistreated. I am part of your family now, whether you like it or not. And it was time for her to start treating me accordingly. If she couldn't manage that, then perhaps it was best for us to maintain some distance. Suit yourself, she replied. I will, thank you. And I hope you take some time to reflect on how your actions are affecting your relationship with your son, I responded. I decided it was time to leave. Maybe when you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve, we can have another conversation. Until then, take care. With that, I left the room, feeling a tumultuous mix of anger and sadness. Confronting Doris was difficult, but standing up for myself was necessary. From that moment, I knew my relationship with her might be irreparably damaged, but I felt confident in my decision. I deserved respect and wouldn't tolerate any more subtle jabs or hurtful comments. My focus had to be on my marriage and building a joyful life with Russell, regardless of Doris's disapproval. When I shared the details of our confrontation with Russell, he surprised me by fully supporting me. He even went as far as to tell his mother that she needed to treat me with respect. However, the situation escalated dramatically when Doris threatened to disown him as well. This was a shock to both of us, and I could see the pain it caused Russell. His mother's willingness to disown her son because he defended his wife was heartbreaking. Yet this difficult situation helped us realize something crucial. We didn't need toxic people in our lives, even if they were family. We deserved love and respect, and if someone couldn't provide that, they didn't deserve a place in our lives. As tough as it was to see Doris behave this way, it served as a wake-up call for Russell. He began to understand that his mother's negativity and disapproval were only holding him back from true happiness. It was time for him to move beyond the toxicity and build a life with me based on love and mutual understanding. Months passed since Doris cut ties with us, and although Russell was deeply affected by his mother's decision, he still missed her despite everything she had said and done. Wanting to support him in finding closure and perhaps paving the way for reconciliation, I planned a dinner date at Russell's favorite restaurant, hoping it would offer him some comfort and maybe even a new beginning. When we arrived at the restaurant and I gave my name, the maitre d' at the front desk looked puzzled and informed me that my name was on the blacklist. This took me by surprise, as Russell and I had always been regular patrons there. Confused and hoping to clear up the misunderstanding, I requested to speak with the manager. To our astonishment, the manager emerged, revealing herself to be none other than Doris. During the months we hadn't seen her, she had been busy expanding her portfolio, which now included managing this very restaurant, Applebee's, our favorite spot. It seemed too calculated to be a mere coincidence. Seeing her there, I felt a surge of shock and disbelief at her pettiness. Well, 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 what do we have here? I never thought I'd see the day when you two would show up at my restaurant, Doris greeted us, not missing a beat in informing us that we were not welcome. Unable to hold back his frustration, Russell began to raise his voice, creating a scene in the restaurant. I found myself torn between backing Russell and trying to prevent the situation from escalating further. Doris, we didn't come here to cause trouble. We just wanted to enjoy a peaceful dinner. I tried to reason with her. A peaceful dinner? With the likes of you? I don't think so. It's quite amusing to see you both here, practically begging to be let in after everything that's happened, she retorted smugly. What are you talking about, Mom? We've always loved this place and now you're saying we're not welcome? Russell was incredulous. It's quite simple. When you choose to marry the person against my wishes, I had to make a decision. I couldn't allow my son to make such a dreadful mistake. So, I decided to safeguard my business from your poor choices, Doris explained coldly. You're sick, Mom. It's disgusting that you're doing this on purpose just to spite us, Russell accused, his voice filled with dismay. Oh, please, Russell. I'm just looking out for my reputation. I can't have people like you associating with my business, Doris dismissed. This is ridiculous, Mom. You're choosing your bigotry over your son. I thought you were better than this, Russell lamented, the hurt clear in his voice. You're the one who chose this path, Russell. Don't blame me for the decisions you've made, Doris retorted sharply. As she spoke, the eyes of everyone in the restaurant were fixed on us, casting an uncomfortable spotlight. It felt deeply embarrassing to be escorted out of Applebee's, a place we once enjoyed freely. Let's just leave, Russell. Arguing won't change her mind, I suggested quietly, eager to escape the escalating tension. You're right, Janice. It's not worth it, Russell replied, disappointment etched on his face. And don't come back. No one wants you here, Doris called out after us, her voice filled with disdain. With that, we stepped out of the restaurant and started to wander aimlessly down the street. Russell was deeply upset, so I encouraged him to open up about his feelings, especially his connection to Applebee's. Let it all out, Russell. How are you really feeling? I know Applebee's was more than just a restaurant to you. Applebee's. It was a place where my dad and I bonded. We'd sit by the window, order our favorite meals, and just talk for hours about everything. It's where we connected, he explained, his voice heavy with loss. It sounds like such a meaningful place for you, and I can't believe Doris would use it to hurt you like this, especially knowing how much those moments with your dad meant to you. It's just so unfair. She knows how special Applebee's is to me, and yet she chose to use it against us just because she doesn't approve of our marriage. You deserve so much better than this, Russell. I wish I could fix it. It's awful to see someone trying to dismantle what we have. I always thought family was meant to support each other, not pull one another apart. It's tough to make sense of why she'd act this way, but sometimes people let their biases get the best of them. We might not be able to change that, but we can choose our response, I reassured him. You're right, I'm done letting her negativity affect us. What matters is that we have each other. Exactly. We'll face this together. And actually, I have some news that might brighten your day a bit. What's that? He asked, curious despite the somber mood. Well, it turns out my dad recently acquired the entire block of buildings on this street, including Applebee's. Really? Why didn't you mention this before? It just happened. He finalized the deal with the investors recently. I was still grappling with the uncertainty of how everything would unfold. I had planned to share the news about my dad owning the complex during a celebratory dinner at the restaurant. That's incredible, Janice. I need to congratulate him later, Russell said, genuinely impressed. We can do that later, but right now there's something else we need to address about your mom, I replied, hinting at a more immediate concern. You see, my dad's quite formidable when it comes to business matters. He won't take kindly to how Doris treated us. He's going to handle this situation. Feeling a mix of urgency and necessity, I decided to call my dad right then and put him on speakerphone so Russell could listen in. I explained everything that had transpired at Applebee's. My dad was upset by the news. I knew Doris wasn't fond of you, but to kick you out of a restaurant, that's a new low. I'm sorry I hadn't reviewed the documents sooner. I only recently received the title deeds for this property and I haven't had the chance to evaluate all the managers yet. But rest assured, I'll take care of this immediately. He reassured us, "Don't worry at all. Give me 20 minutes and I'll be there to sort this out personally." Hearing my dad's determined words brought me a sense of relief but also a bit of concern. I knew he was capable of handling the situation, but I hoped it wouldn't escalate into something messier. My dad is not someone to be trifled with, especially in business. He is also a firm believer in treating customers with fairness and compassion. So, Russell and I waited nervously near the restaurant, trusting that my dad would resolve the issue appropriately. We weren't sure exactly what he planned to do, but we believed in his judgment. Moments later, my dad arrived and we followed him back into Applebee's. He walked with a confident stride that suggested he was ready to take on whatever needed to be done. As he entered, he called out for Doris, loud enough for everyone inside to hear. The tension in the restaurant was palpable as heads turned to watch the unfolding scene. Doris stepped forward, visibly annoyed by the interruption. Doris probably thought she could dismiss my father as easily as she had dismissed us, but my dad is not one to be brushed aside lightly. He raised an eyebrow at her and began with a tone of faux concern. "Doris, my dear, it seems you haven't been keeping up with the latest developments. Did they forget to inform you about the new owner of the 2nd Green Avenue complex?" Doris appeared visibly shaken, clearly caught off guard by the turn of events. "What are you talking about? Who is it?" she stammered, confusion laced in her voice. My dad couldn't suppress a small, knowing smile. "Well, that would be me. I'm the new owner, and I must say I've been here for less than a week, and I'm already encountering troubling complaints about your management." Doris's complexion turned a shade paler as the reality of her predicament dawned on her. "I didn't know that," she muttered, flustered. "Well, perhaps if you had checked your emails or paid closer attention to what's happening around you, you might have known. But it's too late for apologies now," my dad responded with a chuckle. It was satisfying to see Doris on the receiving end of the type of treatment she had meted out to us. Russell, who had been quietly seething by my side, stepped forward and said with resolve, "You had no right to treat us or anyone the way you did, especially Janice. Oh, we've always known you to harbor ill will, but as someone in charge of a public establishment, you should have been the first to understand that discrimination based on personal prejudices is unacceptable. You've clearly violated that principle, and I don't think you're fit to manage this place." Doris, now desperate, pleaded, "Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Even if you didn't know he was the owner, you should have treated all customers fairly without letting your personal biases interfere," I added firmly. "Please, let's discuss this privately." Doris tried to salvage the situation. "There's no need," my dad interjected, his voice loud enough for the bystanders to hear. "I believe everyone here would be interested to know that the person managing Applebee's, who allowed her racism to affect her professional duties, is no longer part of the staff." The murmurs in the restaurant grew louder, fueled by the unfolding drama. Doris, utterly embarrassed, could only stand in silence as she faced the consequences of her actions, while Russell and I watched, relieved that justice was being served. Russell and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and triumph, finally receiving justice after enduring Doris's harsh treatment for so long. My dad decisively handled the situation, warning her that he would call security to escort her out if she didn't leave voluntarily. Embarrassed and on the brink of tears, Doris started her walk of shame out of the restaurant. As she made her exit, the mood in the restaurant instantly lifted. People began to clap and cheer, celebrating her departure, and I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. Russell and I immediately went over to my dad and gave him a big hug, thanking him for his decisive intervention. "You're the best, Dad," I said with a smile, and he chuckled, giving us both a reassuring pat on the back. "It was my pleasure, my dear. I couldn't stand by and watch you two suffer because of her," he replied with a warm smile. Dad then excused himself to check on the kitchen staff and find the next in command to appoint as the acting manager amidst the recent upheaval. He returned shortly after, explaining that he had some important business matters to finalize, including formally terminating Doris and organizing the paperwork to officially name the new acting manager. "Okay, my work here is done for now. You two enjoy your meal on the house," he said, signaling for us to take a seat and relax. As we settled down at a table, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped me. I was still processing the swift turn of events, amazed at how quickly everything had escalated. Yet, above all, I felt incredibly grateful for my dad's support and the strength he provided us through this challenging time. It was comforting to know that no matter what, we had someone on our side, ready to step in when needed. Greetings. My name is Alexis, and I want to share a personal story involving my rather challenging mother-in-law. Let me set the stage by introducing the cast of this narrative. Alongside me, you'll meet my husband Bobby, his dad Tyler, and his mom Helen. My parents will appear too, but they'll play minor roles, simply referred to as mom and dad. My first encounter with Helen was surprisingly pleasant. Bobby and I had been together for a year when he decided it was time for me to meet his parents. Initially, everything went well, and they seemed to like me as much as I liked them. But things took a turn after several meetings as Helen began to grow distant and chilly towards me, which left me baffled and seeking answers. Concerned, I approached Bobby. "I've noticed your mom's been rather distant with me lately. Did I do something wrong? It's worrying me. Please, if I made a mistake, let me know so I can fix it." Bobby hesitated, then replied, "Honestly, the reason is a bit silly and it might upset you, but you deserve to know. It's not about you doing anything wrong, it's just, well, my mom has this odd belief that she can't shake." Driven by curiosity, I pressed him for more details. "What's the issue? I can handle it, just tell me." Bobby took a deep breath. "It's because your parents are divorced. She found out, and somehow it bothers her a lot." This was a revelation I hadn't expected. It seemed so trivial and bizarre to me. I would have laughed it off if Bobby's expression wasn't so earnest and apologetic. I realized he was serious when I recalled a conversation with Helen where I had casually mentioned my parents' divorce due to infidelity, a topic she had inquired about herself. Her behavior made sense now. Her curiosity had been more judgmental than I'd realized, and it explained her sudden coldness. This unexpected insight into Helen's views helped me understand the strange dynamics that had developed. I just couldn't grasp why this was becoming an issue. "I don't see the connection, Bobby. Why does my parents' divorce matter so much to your mom?" Bobby sighed. "She has this outdated idea that kids from divorced families don't turn out well. My mom is quite traditional and thinks couples should stick it out no matter what. Remember, none of this is your fault. My mom's perspective is just a bit peculiar." "That seems unfair," I replied, feeling a mix of disbelief and frustration. I had no clue Helen would think less of me over something like this. What am I supposed to do now? "You don't need to do anything, Alexis," Bobby reassured me. "She'll come around eventually and see how wrong she is. You're an incredible person, and I have no doubt you'll eventually win her over." Despite Bobby's optimism, winning Helen over turned out to be impossible. I tried my best to get back on her good side, overlooking her biased views to foster a better relationship. However, all my efforts to extend olive branches were ignored. I persisted for years, driven by my desire for her approval and my love for Bobby, who shared a close bond with his family. I envisioned a future with him and wanted to be a part of his family circle, but Helen remained unmoved. I never confronted her directly because she never openly shared her disapproval. If Bobby ever corrected her in private, I was unaware. I naively continued my attempts to gain her approval, facing disappointment each time. Years passed, and eventually Bobby proposed. It was a beautiful moment, and I excitedly said yes. Eager to share the joy, I visited my parents to announce the good news. My mom was thrilled, and we had a wonderful celebration. However, things took a strange turn at my dad's house. When he asked to see a photo of Bobby's family, I proudly showed him my only picture with Bobby's parents. Upon seeing it, my dad's expression turned grave. I sensed something was amiss, but chose not to probe, especially with Bobby there. Later, when I called my dad to discuss his reaction, he hesitated before confessing, "Alexis, I'm not sure how to say this. It's a long story and I deeply regret it. I never wanted to bring this up. But it seems like fate has its twists and turns. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? Why did you look so strange when I showed you that picture of Bobby's parents?" Taking a deep breath, he finally said, "Alexis, the woman in that picture, Bobby's mom, Helen, she was involved with me. She was the reason your mother and I divorced." I was stunned. "What are you saying, Dad?" "Yes, Alexis, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Helen moved away before your mom and I finalized our divorce, and I never saw her again. I had no clue that my past mistake would resurface like this. Your mom and I kept it from you because we wanted to protect you, but it seems my past actions are catching up with me." My dad explained everything about their affair. Tyler and Bobby were oblivious to it all, as Helen had moved away before any confrontations could happen. Thus, while Helen enjoyed a seemingly happy marriage with Tyler, my parents ended up separated. Later, my mom called to confirm everything, mentioning they even had evidence confirming Helen's identity. My mind reeled with this bombshell. Not only did I now know Helen had been my father's affair partner, but also that Bobby and Tyler were completely unaware. I was torn about whether to disclose this revelation. They all seemed happy, and despite Helen's coldness towards me, I hesitated to disrupt their lives. No matter how Helen had treated me, I didn't want to be the reason her marriage fell apart. Yet, it turned out Helen was even more manipulative than I had imagined. Just a week after I learned the truth, she organized a lavish dinner party at an upscale restaurant under the guise of celebrating our engagement. Bobby was thrilled to announce our plans to his extended family, and I was equally excited. However, when we arrived at the dinner, I realized the celebration was not as genuine as I thought. Helen started the event by saying, "Thank you everyone for joining us today. While it appears we are here to celebrate my son's engagement, there are some important matters we need to discuss regarding Bobby's decision. Isn't that right, Tyler?" "Yes, Helen, that's correct," Tyler added, oblivious to the underlying tension. As Helen took the floor, it became evident that the dinner wasn't just to honor our engagement, but to scrutinize it under her controlling gaze. Everyone seemed happy, but the air was charged with Helen's unspoken judgments, making the evening far from the joyful celebration I had anticipated. Unfortunately, I strongly disagree with this union, and I cannot give it my blessing. Helen's declaration left me utterly stunned. I glanced at Bobby, who mirrored my shock. Neither of us had anticipated that Helen had organized this elaborate party not to celebrate, but to publicly reject me as a suitable partner for her son. Even Tyler appeared taken aback, seemingly unaware of Helen's intentions. My mind reeled, unable to process Helen's harsh words. Bobby turned to his mother, disbelief etched across his face. "Mom, are you joking? This isn't funny at all. Do I look like I'm joking, Bobby? This is no joke. I simply cannot accept Alexis joining our family. But Mom, Alexis is already part of the family. I'm marrying her no matter what. You don't have any legitimate reason to oppose our marriage. Why are you doing this? Bobby's confusion was palpable. We were a happy couple, and it baffled us both why Helen harbored such disdain towards me. I had always strived to be a good partner to Bobby, and her unwarranted hostility was bewildering. However, Helen quickly made her reasoning clear with a scornful look directed at me, then turned back to Bobby. You cannot marry her, Bobby. She's from a broken home. We all know how children from such backgrounds turn out. She's damaged goods. Why would you want someone like that? Mom, what the hell is wrong with you? Alexis is not damaged goods. Her parents' marriage has nothing to do with who she is as a person. She's an amazing woman, and we are in love. Oh, Bobby, here it is again. Why don't you understand? A woman like her doesn't know what love is. Look at her parents, Bobby. They couldn't make it work despite their love. What do you think Alexis has learned from that? Helen continued, her tone increasingly spiteful. Helen, you're being completely unfair to Alexis, Bobby countered firmly. She's perfect for me. We've been together for 7 years. What more does she need to prove? You just won't understand, Tyler. I'm sure she will end up cheating on our son. I know her parents divorced over infidelity, and any child from such a marriage is bound to be unfaithful. I'm only looking out for our son. I was devastated by Helen's cruel and baseless accusations. It was clear she had never liked me, but the venom in her words was something I had not anticipated, revealing a side of her I had hoped never to see. I was completely blindsided by the extent Helen would go to degrade me. She had orchestrated a grand family dinner, not as a celebration, but as a platform to publicly berate me. The things she said about me and my family were utterly vile, leaving me feeling humiliated and on the verge of tears. Fortunately, not everyone at the dinner shared her sentiment. Bobby and Tyler stood up for me, while the rest of the family members present appeared visibly uncomfortable with Helen's harsh words. None of them sided with her. Despite the lack of support, Helen didn't hold back. Her relentless insults pushed me to my limit, and I finally spoke up. You need to stop, Helen. This is too much. I have always treated you with respect, and this is how you repay that? You even organized this dinner just to tear me down. Why are you surprised, Alexis? I've made it clear from the start that I don't want you with my son. Did you forget what I said? You still don't belong in our family, Helen retorted. Helen, I've given everything over the past 7 years to Bobby. I've strived to be the best partner for him and to build a relationship with his family. I don't deserve to be treated like this or to be insulted, I responded, my voice steady but full of emotion. I can't believe you would label me as flawed just because my parents are divorced. People's upbringing influences their worldview, Alexis. I bet you'll end up just like your parents and ruin your marriage with my son. I can't let you hurt him, Helen claimed obstinately. Helen was unyielding in her stance, continuing to belittle me and even attempting to manipulate Bobby into ending our engagement. My patience was wearing thin after enduring such public humiliation. Bobby did his best to intervene, but Helen was adamant about making her point. Seeing that she wasn't going to relent, I knew I had to stand up for myself, although I managed to keep my composure. You know what, Helen? It's ironic for you to lecture about marriage and love when you have no respect for your own. What the hell do you mean? I have the perfect marriage and never gave my husband any reason to doubt me. Helen snapped back, visibly taken aback by my defiance. Her response only highlighted the hypocrisy of her actions, given the secrets I now knew about her past. I was filled with a mix of anger and resolve, determined not to let her falsehoods define my relationship with Bobby. I know the importance of maintaining a stable marriage and providing a nurturing home for my son. Helen declared with a hint of righteousness in her voice. "Oh, really, Helen? Interestingly, you mentioned that because you've conveniently left out your tumultuous past. It seems like you've forgotten what you've done," I retorted, feeling a surge of boldness. Helen's face fell and her expression turned anxious. "What are you trying to imply, Alexis?" she stammered, clearly rattled by where the conversation was heading. I realized that this was the moment of truth, and holding back any longer was only weighing me down. The burden of keeping Helen's secret, especially knowing how genuinely good Tyler was, had become too much. Her ongoing spite towards me only fueled my decision, so I chose to reveal everything right there in the midst of everyone. After all, Helen hadn't bothered to keep her accusations private, so why should I? I smiled thinly at her and said, I see you know what I'm hinting at. So tell me, Helen, was it fun to jeopardize another family's happiness to secure your own?" "What nonsense are you spouting, Alexis? I've done nothing of the sort," Helen defensively shot back. "Really? So you don't recall having an affair with my father and contributing to the breakup of my parents' marriage?" The words hung heavily in the air as I watched her face turn from nervous to shocked. She hadn't expected me to know about her indiscretion, nor did she realize the man she had an affair with was my father. The color drained from Helen's face as the room fell silent, punctuated only by gasps from around the table. Bobby and Tyler seemed stunned, unable to process the revelation. It was Tyler who finally spoke, his voice breaking slightly. "What did you just say? Helen cheated on me with your father?" "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Tyler. It's true. I only learned about it recently myself when my dad recognized her in a photo," I explained, my tone sincere yet firm. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Alexis?" Tyler asked, a mixture of hurt and betrayal in his eyes. I responded softly, "I wanted to protect you all, to preserve what seemed like a happy family. I know Helen has no qualms about breaking up homes, but I do. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." As the reality sank in for Bobby and Tyler, Helen began to recover from her initial shock. Desperate to salvage her image, she started to concoct a narrative, suddenly shrieking, "These are all lies. Alexis is just trying to humiliate me. I've always been a perfect wife. I would never do such a thing to my husband. Tyler, Bobby, you have to believe me." But her panicked reaction only served to validate my claims further. Tyler, now looking more doubtful, replied, "Your reaction doesn't exactly inspire confidence, Helen. I've had my doubts for a long time. I need to understand what's going on here. Alexis, are you making this up?" Tyler's voice was fraught with confusion as he confronted me, trying to grasp the swirling accusations. "Tyler, she's lying. She's just upset because I tried to protect my son from someone unworthy like her," Helen retorted sharply, clinging to her stance. "Helen, hold on. Alexis, do you have any proof of what you're claiming?" Tyler asked, his interest piqued, needing tangible evidence to navigate the storm of allegations. "Actually, I do have proof," I responded calmly. My father had anticipated the need for evidence and had sent me their conversation histories. I asked my dad to send me some of their old messages, just in case I decided it was time to reveal the truth. "I can show them to you if you'd like." Helen's face morphed into a mask of dread as she realized I had substantial evidence. She had thought her past actions, hidden by distance and time, would never come to light. Her bad luck, however, led her directly into the revelation she had feared. When Tyler asked to see the evidence, I showed him the screenshots my father had preserved. They communicated via social media, and he had kept all their exchanges. I handed my phone to Tyler, who scrolled through the messages, his expression growing grimmer by the moment. Helen, flustered and desperate, watched as Tyler absorbed the information. Tyler, you're not thinking clearly. I haven't cheated on you. Those screenshots can be faked easily. Alexis, I can't believe you'd stoop so low as to try to humiliate me and destroy my marriage. Whoa, Helen, hold on right there. Those screenshots are not fake. And if Tyler still has doubts, I have even more evidence, I countered firmly. Remember the phone call you made to my mom boasting about your affair with my dad? My mom recorded that call and sent it to me. I can play it for you if Tyler wants. Tyler, now more resolute, nodded. I would like to hear that too. Go ahead, put it on speaker. I think everyone here should listen to it. The room was tense as I prepared to play the recording. Helen's face was a mix of panic and remembrance of her indiscretions. After receiving a reassuring nod from Bobby, whom I felt bad for keeping in the dark, I pressed play. The recording echoed around the room, laying bare Helen's brazenness and duplicity. While I won't delve into the specifics of what she told my mom, it was damning. Helen had always been a manipulative figure, and if I had come across this recording earlier, I wouldn't have bothered trying to maintain any facade of civility with her. If I had known the full extent of Helen's betrayal earlier, I would have exposed the truth immediately. As the recording played, revealing Helen's taunts toward my mother, Tyler, and Bobby's expressions turned to sheer anger. Her distinct voice, known for its whiny tone, left no room for doubt. It was undeniably her on the tape. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler's gaze on Helen was filled with contempt as he waited for her to respond. Tearfully, Helen stammered, "Tyler, I can explain. It was just a small mistake." "How does cheating on your husband and mocking a hurt wife qualify as being a good wife, Helen?" Tyler challenged, his voice rising with incredulity. "You not only had an affair with a married man, but also taunted his wife after their marriage collapsed. What possible explanation could you have for such cruelty?" "Please, Tyler, don't speak to me like that. It was a one-time thing. I made a mistake, and it's never happened again," Helen pleaded, her voice breaking. "I'm not sure I can believe that, Helen. Even if it was just one time, it's more than enough for me to reconsider our entire marriage." Tyler responded sternly, his trust visibly shattered. Helen's crying intensified, her sobs growing louder as the gravity of her actions sunk in. Everyone at the dinner was openly criticizing her now, no longer willing to listen to her excuses. She frantically begged Tyler to forgive her, claiming it was just a one-time incident, but Tyler remained unmoved. In desperation, Helen turned to Bobby, seeking his support. "Bobby, you have to make your father understand. I haven't done anything like that again. Please don't let him destroy our perfect family over this. How dare you call this a perfect family, Mom? How can you think I would support you after you tried to ruin my relationship with Alexis, blaming her for being from a broken home when you were the one who caused such pain?" Bobby's disgust was palpable. "I'm done, Mom. I will marry Alexis, and I intend to keep my distance from you, even if Dad decides to stay with you. I can't be around you anymore." Helen's cries filled the room, her emotional breakdown peaking as the guests began to leave the restaurant, the atmosphere having turned decidedly awkward. Some of them approached me, offering comfort, visibly upset by Helen's cruel attempt to humiliate me in public. The consensus was clear. Everyone was thoroughly disappointed in Helen's behavior, and Bobby was resolute in his decision to distance himself from her, ensuring our future together was safeguarded from her toxic influence. After the tumultuous events at the restaurant, Bobby and I headed home. I was anxious about how he felt, knowing that I had withheld such significant information from him. As soon as we settled in, I turned to him and apologized. "Bobby, I'm so sorry for not telling you sooner. I was unsure about what to do. I've seen how much you love your family, and it was breaking my heart to think I could be causing trouble." "Alexis, it doesn't matter how much I love my family. If someone behaves badly or does something terrible, I can't just ignore it. I won't tolerate wrongdoing," Bobby replied firmly, his voice filled with resolve. "And you shouldn't feel horrible. You were put in a tough spot, and you spoke up because my dad asked for the truth. I can't blame you for defending yourself. Everyone needed to know the truth." Bobby continued, reassuring me, "As for my mom, I was already planning to reduce contact with her even before you revealed her affair. I couldn't stand by and watch her insult you like that. It was utterly unacceptable." I felt a wave of relief knowing Bobby didn't hold any resentment towards me. My guilt about him being caught between us eased. Bobby was supportive, understanding my position completely. We reconciled without any lingering bitterness. Now, you might wonder what happened to Helen after her deceit was exposed. Well, the outcome was quite ironic. The woman who had criticized me for coming from a divorced family ended up facing a divorce herself. That's right, Tyler filed for divorce within just a week of the revelations, determined to sever ties for good. Since the house was his ancestral property, Helen had no claim over it. Moreover, in our state, infidelity is a serious offense that heavily influences divorce proceedings. Ultimately, Helen was left with almost nothing, forced to start over and take a low-wage job to make ends meet. Helen's desperation led her to our doorstep multiple times. Initially, she begged us to convince Tyler to reconsider the divorce. She even offered to apologize to my parents in a bid to garner my sympathy. When that didn't work, she returned several times asking for financial help. Bobby and I were not interested in helping her manipulate her way back into a comfortable life, especially after her attempts to use us. Each time we made it clear she wasn't welcome and sent her away. Through all this, Bobby and I grew stronger together, our bond fortified by facing and overcoming these challenges. We learned a lot about standing by each other and upholding our values, no matter the external pressures. Just 3 months ago, Bobby and I tied the knot. By that time, Tyler and Helen had finalized their divorce and were each navigating their separate lives. After everything that had transpired, Bobby and I had a serious conversation and mutually decided that it was best not to invite his mother to our wedding. Honestly, neither of us wanted her presence to overshadow our special day. We had a beautiful ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. It was intimate and filled with love, exactly as we had envisioned. Helen was completely unaware of our wedding plans and only found out when we shared our joyous moments online. Seeing the photos, she bombarded us with a series of bitter texts. Her reaction only confirmed that we had made the right decision in not including her. Subsequently, we decided to block her number on both our phones to prevent any further negativity from infiltrating our newlywed bliss. Since then, Bobby and I have been relishing the peace and quiet. It's been wonderful to enjoy each other's company without the drama. As things stand, we don't foresee any reason to reconnect with Helen. Our focus is on building our life together, free from past turmoil. It's often said that money can reveal the darker sides of people, and I experienced this firsthand. My sister-in-law Abigail changed when she learned about my substantial inheritance. I had chosen not to broadcast this financial windfall as it was a private matter, but perhaps my husband Eric or his brother Jonathan mentioned it to her inadvertently. I can't fault them. After all, there were subtle changes in how Eric and I were living, which might have sparked Abigail's curiosity. Although I didn't want my wealth to be public knowledge, I didn't expect Eric or Jonathan to conceal the truth from their sister. I assumed it wouldn't concern Abigail since it was none of her business. However, that's when the trouble began. One day, Abigail unexpectedly showed up at our home commenting, "I heard you received a large inheritance, Susan. You're so fortunate to be able to afford such luxuries so easily." I replied, "It's not about luck, Abigail. I lost a loved one to gain this, and I would gladly trade the money to have them back." It's crucial to remember where our fortunes come from and to consider sharing with family. However, Abigail was not merely making conversation. She had an agenda. Without any hint of my growing unease, she continued, "I was hoping you might help me with my rent occasionally. Things have been tough since my second child was born, and any assistance would be greatly appreciated." Her words took me aback. "Abigail, why don't you seek employment to support your family? We can't provide for you indefinitely." "How can you say that, Eric?" she retorted. "I deserve some help from my family. I prefer to stay home with my kids rather than work a minimum wage job, especially when my sister-in-law is wealthy. You'll help me out for the kids' sake, right? They need a stable home." Abigail knew how to tug at our heartstrings, using her children to appeal to our sympathies. But the situation was more complex than she made it seem, and her approach left me both frustrated and saddened. When Abigail began using her children as a bargaining tool, it understandably infuriated Eric. To a certain extent, Abigail had always been dependent on others. She had never worked, relying entirely on her parents until they passed away. Now she turned to Eric and his brother Jonathan for financial support. They did help, but their assistance was intended solely for the benefit of the children. Abigail, however, used her children's plight to manipulate emotions and gain sympathy, a tactic she now employed with me, and, embarrassingly, it succeeded. I found myself agreeing to pay half of her rent, hoping it would put an end to her requests. Unfortunately, I was mistaken. This agreement only seemed to ignite Abigail's greed for more. She frequently asked for money or insisted we cover other expenses, claiming it was all for the children. Eric and I grew weary of her relentless demands, feeling exploited, yet hesitant to refuse because of the kids. Despite sensing that I was being taken advantage of, I avoided confronting the issue to prevent further conflict. However, I soon realized that I should have set boundaries with Abigail much earlier. The situation escalated when she began nagging me to fund a vacation to a costly tourist-popular city. She was persistent, but I stood firm, insisting that a luxury trip was neither essential nor a reasonable request. Abigail was displeased, but eventually stopped pestering me about it. For a brief moment, things seemed to return to normal, until a particular lunch date with her. During lunch, Abigail offered to pay and took my credit card to the counter. She was away for quite some time, but I thought little of it. It wasn't until the next day that I discovered a shocking $45,000 charge on my card. Panicked, I called Eric, who was as clueless and concerned as I was. I then reached out to Jonathan, who worked at a bank and could perhaps shed some light on the situation. After explaining the circumstances of our lunch, Jonathan's question hit me hard. "Did you give Abigail your card recently?" It was then that I began to piece together the extent of Abigail's deception and the real trouble I was facing. I handed my credit card to Abigail so she could pay for our lunch, but I soon found myself in a conversation I never anticipated. I expressed my suspicions to Jonathan. "Do you think Abigail might have made some unauthorized transactions?" To which he responded with unsettling certainty, "I don't just think it, Susan. I know she did. She even mentioned planning to use your money for her vacation." This revelation was a complete shock. I urged Jonathan to send me my bank statements to see the full extent of the damage. As I feared, there it was. A hefty charge for a vacation booked just 3 weeks ahead. I immediately called Abigail, needing her to confess. "Abigail, you need to be honest with me. Did you use my card for anything other than our lunch bill?" After a brief pause, she admitted, "Yes, I booked a few things. Remember that trip I wanted? I went ahead and booked it." I was stunned. "Wait a minute, Abigail. Are you saying you used my card to book yourself a vacation without my permission?" "Yes, Susan," she replied, almost too casually. "I've been planning this for a while and finally saw my chance. The kids will love it." I was furious, more. "This is insane, Abigail. You can't just take my card and book whatever you want. That's theft. That's illegal." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "We're family and you have plenty of money. It's not a big deal. You should be happy for us." "Absolutely not, Abigail. I won't let you go on a vacation with my money. Just because your family doesn't mean you get a free ride at my expense." I was appalled by her disregard for my autonomy and the casual manner in which she committed a clear crime. It was clear Abigail didn't grasp the severity of her actions, or perhaps she didn't care, thinking her familial ties would shield her from consequences. She was mistaken. I was determined not to let her misuse my resources without repercussions. I was about to demand she cancel everything when she smirked and challenged, "What are you going to do about it, Susan? The trips are already booked." Her arrogance only fueled my resolve. There was no way I would allow her to enjoy a holiday funded by deceit. I was ready to take whatever steps necessary to rectify the situation and ensure Abigail faced the consequences of her actions. Abigail dared to say, "It's all non-refundable, Susan. Even if you cancel, you won't get a single penny back." I couldn't believe it. "What on earth, Abigail? You booked a non-refundable trip with my money? Are you out of your mind?" "Nope, I'm not insane. You should be thankful I got such a good deal," she replied, unabashed. "Now that you can't cancel and get your money back, you might as well let me and my family enjoy it. We haven't had a nice trip in ages. Stop being so selfish with your money." If this had been any other situation, I might have admired Abigail's cunning, but her using her shrewd tactics to exploit me was infuriating. She was confident throughout our talk because she had cleverly ensured I couldn't interfere with her plans by choosing a non-refundable option. I was so close to losing my temper completely and lashing out at her. I even considered canceling everything right then and there, regardless of the cost, just to prove a point. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about her sense of entitlement and her dismissive attitude. However, canceling wouldn't solve anything. I knew it wouldn't deter Abigail and could even provoke further schemes from her end. I wasn't about to take a financial hit just to get back at her. Instead, I devised a different plan. Taking a deep breath, I spoke into the phone with feigned resignation. "Fine then, Abigail. Since you've already booked a non-refundable vacation, there's nothing I can do. It seems you did manage to save money after all." "Ah, I see you've come to your senses, Susan," Abigail gloated, thinking she had won. "I'm glad you could look past your selfishness and let your family enjoy your wealth too. This makes you a bigger person." "You might be right, Abigail. Thank you for teaching me such a valuable lesson," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm, though she didn't catch on. "I'll be sure to return the favor when I have the chance." "Oh, don't worry about that," she eagerly responded, already planning more. "Maybe you can help me book another vacation next year. That would be the perfect way to thank me." The conversation was becoming unbearable. Even with a solid plan in mind, I had to end the call. I quickly said goodbye and hung up, spending the rest of the day fuming and plotting the perfect way to turn the tables on Abigail. She thought she could manipulate me into supporting her extravagant desires, but she was sorely mistaken. If she thought I was that generous, she had another thing coming. I've always believed in setting clear boundaries, but when Abigail crossed the line by stealing my credit card and showing utter disrespect and entitlement, I knew I had to act. She wasn't just being manipulative, she was acting criminally, and despite being family, I couldn't overlook her actions. When Eric came home that evening, I explained everything that had happened. He was stunned to hear about his sister's behavior and extremely concerned about the financial implications. Learning that Abigail, his sister, was behind this only intensified his anger. He couldn't hide his disappointment in her lack of remorse and her audacity to suggest she had done me a favor. "This is serious, Susan. Eric said, clearly upset. I can't believe my sister would do something so reckless and entitled. I'm so sorry you're dragged into this because of my family. It's not your fault, Eric, I reassured him, seeing his distress. But I can't let Abigail enjoy this trip on my dime. It's just wrong. She intentionally booked a non-refundable vacation to make sure I couldn't cancel it. She's malicious, Eric, and I can't support her behavior. I've come up with a plan, but I'm not sure how you'll react since she's your sister. I hesitated, unsure if Eric would think I was going too far. But I knew I couldn't keep such important details from him, not wanting to cause any strain in our marriage. So I laid out my plan for him. To my surprise, Eric was supportive. He even found a hint of humor in the situation given the cleverness of the plan. That is a brilliant plan, actually, he chuckled. Remind me never to get on your bad side, my dear. You don't think it's too drastic? I'm really angry right now, so I might not be seeing things. You need to tell me if it's too much, I said, seeking his genuine opinion. Maybe it is a bit much, but I don't care, Eric replied, his tone firm. My sister deserves to face some consequences for her actions. She's been a scheming witch for too long. I'm fully on board with your plan. Eric's support was reassuring. It confirmed that we were on the same page and ready to ensure that Abigail would not get away with her manipulative tactics. Together, we were determined to see this through and make sure she learned a crucial lesson about respect and boundaries. Eric's suggestion caught me off guard. Susan, I want to add something to your plan. Regardless of whether you go through with your revenge, you'll still lose a significant amount of money. That kind of money isn't trivial, and there's no reason you should just write it off. I think you should sue Abigail to reclaim what is rightfully yours. I was stunned. I had been anxious about how Eric might react to my plans for retribution, fearing it might upset him. But here he was, not just supporting me, but taking it a step further. This moment made me realize just how supportive my husband was, ready to stand by me even against his sister. Ladies, take note. Find someone who stands up for you like this. Eric truly showed his mettle that day, proving that he wouldn't tolerate anyone taking advantage of me. With Eric's encouragement, I felt empowered to proceed. There wasn't much preparation needed for the legal route. The evidence was already overwhelming. I informed Jonathan about our decision, and he supported it fully, amused by the twist. He even sent me screenshots of his conversation with Abigail, where she brazenly admitted to using my credit card to fund her vacation. Her lack of remorse and boastful attitude about her clever plan was damning. I forwarded these screenshots to my lawyer, but instructed them to hold off on starting the legal proceedings until Abigail was on her way to her dream vacation. She was too caught up in her plans, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. She hadn't bothered to check in with me in the 3 weeks leading up to her departure. Meanwhile, I was busy at work and meticulously building my case. The day she boarded her plane marked the beginning of her reality check. It was the perfect moment to launch the lawsuit, catching her completely off guard while she was away and likely feeling most secure. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about teaching Abigail a lesson in respect and boundaries, ensuring she understood the consequences of her actions. With everything in place, I was ready to see this through and make sure justice was served. When I set my revenge in motion, I knew it was only a matter of time before I would hear from Abigail. As expected, she called me frantic and on the verge of tears. "Susan, what is happening? The hotel just told us you canceled everything. Our shuttle was canceled too, and we had to rent a car. Now they're saying our booking was canceled this morning." "Yes, Abigail, the bookings were indeed canceled," I replied calmly. "What? You canceled everything? Why do you sound so unsurprised? Did you think I would let you go ahead with plans I never approved or made myself?" Abigail was silent for a moment, clearly trying to comprehend my words, but then her shock turned into anger, and she practically yelled at me. "What the hell, Susan? How could you do this to me? You need to fix this now and rebook the hotel we were supposed to stay at." "Oh, absolutely not, Abigail. And what would you do even if I rebooked? I've also canceled all the activities you planned, as well as your reservation at that expensive restaurant you were looking forward to tomorrow." "You canceled those too? How can you be so cruel, Susan? How could you do this to your own family? People who steal from me and act entitled about it don't qualify as my family. You've shown yourself to be nothing more than an entitled leech. I'm done being your ATM, especially after the blatant disrespect you've shown for my boundaries." Abigail threatened in response, "Just wait until I get back. I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'll call my brother. He'll put you in your place." "I'm just fulfilling the promises I made, Abigail. Go ahead and call your brother. See what he has to say. And by the way, I canceled your return tickets as well, so good luck coming back to teach me a lesson." Abigail continued to yell and hurl insults, but I was no longer willing to endure her vitriol. Exhausted and completely out of patience, I hung up on her. My focus was clear. I was done allowing her to use and manipulate me. The actions I took were severe, but necessary to protect my boundaries and demonstrate that her behavior was entirely unacceptable. I was almost certain that Abigail would try to manipulate Eric after our confrontation, but he was ready for her call and eager to set things straight with his entitled sister. I couldn't help but chuckle, imagining the shock on Abigail's face when Eric would firmly tell her off. It was a satisfying thought, knowing how she'd react to being firmly put in her place. Not long after, Abigail called me back, this time in tears, truly crying. Her earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by a pleading tone. "Susan, I am so sorry. I really should have asked for your permission before using your card. I just wanted a nice vacation for me and my family. I wasn't buying it." "No, Abigail, you wanted a vacation for yourself on someone else's dime. You didn't even take the kids, so don't play the family card with me. I know I messed up. I have no excuses. I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. Please just rebook everything for me. We literally don't have the money to stay here." "You should have thought about that before booking a vacation you couldn't afford," I replied. "There's no way I'm helping you after the way you acted when I confronted you about stealing from me. But I already told you it was a mistake. Why are you being so difficult, Susan? If you had just helped me book a vacation since you have the money, I wouldn't have had to go behind your back. Abigail, I'm not obligated to finance your lifestyle, and you had no right to force me to pay for your luxuries. I already do enough for you and your kids. Say what you want, Abigail, it doesn't change the fact. And I'm sure by now you've realized that neither of your brothers are on your side." Indeed, Abigail had already reached out to her brothers, seeking sympathy and assistance, but to no avail. They held firm, reprimanding her before ending the calls. She was left with no support, which led her to desperately contact me again, still struggling to shed her entitled demeanor. However, nothing she said could sway me. I was resolute in my decision not to fund her any further. Her manipulation had reached its limit, and I was done enabling her behavior. When I made my position clear, Abigail finally realized that I was serious and attempted a different approach. She sounded resigned when she said, "Fine, you don't have to pay for my trip, but at least cover the cost for us to fly back. We can't even afford the return tickets. Please, Susan, don't leave us stranded." But I was resolute. "No, Abigail. Like I said, I'm not giving you another cent. How you manage to return is not my concern anymore. You can use those scheming skills of yours to figure out a solution. I will remember this, Susan. You're mocking me while I'm in a bad situation. I'll get back to you for this. This isn't over," she retorted bitterly. "No, Abigail, it's far from over. In fact, it's just beginning, but instead of plotting revenge, you should be more concerned about the lawsuit I filed against you today," I informed her, calm but firm. "What lawsuit? What are you talking about?" Abigail's voice was filled with panic. Did you think I'd just absorb the financial loss from canceling a non-refundable trip? Of course not. So, your brother and I have decided to sue you for the money you cost us. You'll learn all the details once you manage to get back home. Bye for now, I concluded, hanging up as she began to yell again. Abigail was always good at making noise and concocting manipulative schemes. I was curious to see how she would navigate her way out of this predicament, but for my peace of mind, I decided to block her on my phone and all other communication platforms. Later, I learned that Eric and Jonathan had done the same. That evening, Jonathan came over, and we discussed the whole situation. We collectively decided that it was time to cut ties with Abigail. We had endured her toxic behavior and sense of entitlement for too long. From now on, we will stop all direct support to her. We agreed to help out with the kids to ensure they weren't kept away from us. But Abigail and her husband, who fully supported her actions, were no longer welcome in our lives. Abigail returned from her so-called dream vacation the next day. I wasn't sure where she stayed that night. My best guess was the airport. Eventually, one of her husband's friends helped them by lending money for their flights home. They tried to confront us at our house upon their return, but we turned them away. About 3 weeks later, Abigail came back, this time alone, pleading for me to drop the lawsuit. Her situation had grown even more dire, as her husband was now talking about divorce. It was clear that her actions had serious consequences, affecting not just her vacation plans but her entire family dynamic. Abigail's husband, overwhelmed by her reckless actions and their consequences, decided he couldn't bear the burden of her mistakes. Frustrated with her failed schemes and unwilling to face the impending legal challenges, he chose to distance himself and ended their marriage. As a result, Abigail found herself in a dire financial situation, unable to afford the costs of a divorce or defend herself in the lawsuit I had initiated. When Abigail came to me, seeking leniency, I remained firm. My decision was clear. I told her not to contact us again. The lawsuit proceeded, and Abigail narrowly escaped jail time. Instead, she was placed on a stringent repayment plan. Any failure to meet her payment obligations would risk imprisonment. The financial pressure forced her to find employment since the alimony she received from the divorce wasn't sufficient to cover all her expenses. Her husband gained full custody of their children and moved in with his mother, providing a stable home for them. Meanwhile, Abigail faced homelessness for a period after losing her house, partly because I had ceased assisting with her rent. Fortunately, my brother-in-law's mother is very cooperative, which means we still enjoy frequent visits with the children. Ultimately, I achieved the justice I sought, and I'm gradually recuperating the funds Abigail took from me. She now works at a job she dislikes, primarily to fulfill her repayment obligations. It seems Abigail's life will be challenging for some time, a stark reminder of the consequences of her actions and the importance of respecting others' boundaries and rights.